Då är inspelningen startad. Recorden started. And most welcome to 1459 of the Heidegger series. Let's see if I can back off a bit here. We will continue with the text by David Morris, Chirality of Being, exploring Merleau-Pontian Ontology. And we are currently in the PDF at page 4. There will be a link in the description to where we currently are at. The chirality of being. What we discussed last time was how chirality is foundational in both the directly accessible, what is unveiled, what we can reach, touch, so to speak, but also what is veiled, what is covered, what is out of view. An important thing to understand is that something that is out of view, veiled, is completely out of view. That remind me about the British psychologist and researcher Ian Gilchrist's division between left and right hemisphere. The right hemisphere corresponds to what is covered, the veiled, and the left hemisphere is very parallel to what is uncovered, out there. So the brain hemispheres seem to take an equal chiral part in a spiral progression of understanding. And when you are in the left hemisphere, nothing is covered. Everything is out and everything looks exactly the same. So for the left hemisphere, there is nothing covered. And if something should be covered, it's seen as a fault, problematic. So I will devote one lecture to compare Ian McGilchrist to that of Chirality and see what this comparison will open up. But there are definitely many connections here from the scientific research of Ian McGilchrist and the more philosophical viewpoint of David Morris and of course Hans Riem that we previously. I will now continue with the text. We are at the 4th page and it's the last paragraph. And we just mentioned a molecular echo of Derrida's point about pharmacon. To show that chirality is a foundational thing, not only in physics, but also chemistry and biology. Enantiomers, and more specifically, homochirality, a bias toward left or right-handed versions of enantiomers of given molecules are in fact crucial to life. Pasteur, who is the one who discovered that molecules have asymmetry and also that living organisms selectively consume molecules according to chirality of their asymmetry. Thought that only living things could produce homochirality. and that this discovery allowed for a well-marked line of demarcation between the chemistry of living matter and the chemistry of dead matter. My comment here is also that there is a very clear connection with the right hemisphere because it thrives on asymmetry, whereas the left only sees identity and symmetry. Just as Bergson writes that wherever anything lives, there is open somewhere a register in which time is being inscribed. We could say that wherever there is life, there is bias. In terrestrial life forms, the bias is such that amino acids are in left form, while sugars are mostly in right. Interestingly, physicist Gideon Gillat argues that chiral molecules are of evolutionary advantage since their energetic interface with the world sets up temporally irreversible processes crucial to life. That is, in homochiral versus other sorts of molecular populations. It is more likely that chemical reactions will go in one direction only, and those are components binding into products, but not products breaking down into components. Which means that detecting the products of chemical reactions gives a measurement of time passing. This would mean that Bergsonian inscription of time and chiral bias are connected. Homochirality on the micro level inflects its way upward. Helaces and fibers formed from chiral molecules twist in one direction only. So seemingly symmetrical muscles on opposite sides of the body, in fact, have fibers that twist in the same direction. Which means that our bodies, in fact, have a deep geometrical asymmetry. The muscle fibers in your left and right arms spiral in the same direction. So on this level, your left and right sides are not mirror images of one another. So there is, because of the symmetry, a unity in direction, which wouldn't be possible otherwise. Strangely too, there are drugs that affect one side of the body more than the other, suggesting that between the sides of our body there may be some more text here. There may be subtle molecular differences left over from embryogenesis. Indeed, molecular chirality and animal asymmetry are linked phenomena. This is very close to Raymond Dart, the South African anthropologist and also researcher in this chirality of the body. Wrote extensively of this already 50, 60 years ago. Most animals exhibit bilateral or radial symmetry. But animal symmetry is pervasively broken by asymmetries on various levels. Humans exhibit left or right-handedness and brain lateralization and are hair parts to one side. Some animals exhibit asymmetric patterns on their surfaces, and some crabs develop oversized claws on just one side. Many snails have shells spiraling in just one direction, typical of the species. And hermit crabs specialized to inhabit the shells of such species that have muscles that asymmetrically twist their bodies to fit the shells. To make a little movement here. Sorry about that. It's gonna put a pause here. Just a bit. Sorry about that. Disturbances. No. Beneath outer symmetry, our internal organs are asymmetric and asymmetrically placed relative to one another. And these asymmetries are crucial to the function of the organs and the body as a whole. Disturbances of these asymmetries, such as dextrocardia, heterotaxia, or isomerisms, are associated with physiological difficulties. The only exception to such difficulties is situs inversus, a complete mirror image reversal of all asymmetrical organs and pairings. We should also note that in animal and other motion, the asymmetrical postures are key to action, something artists know. Since, we need a little bit more text here. Since symmetrical form reflects stasis, repose, passivity, and even death, whilst asymmetry reflects instability, motion, action, life. This is also true of at a physiological level. Muscles contract by what amounts to a one-way ratcheting of molecules. Blood moves back to the heart in virtue of one-way valves in veins. Life is a phenomenon of one-way, 1 way, 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 way directedness of sense, which Aristotle points out in his considerations of desires as an orexis that stretches toward things. Asymmetry is endemic to life and arguably crucial to it. But how are the directions of asymmetries determined? Life entails that amino acids end up being folded just one way, that the heart be on one side only. But what determines that amino acids are levose and the heart on the left? Life might work just as well if hearts and amino acids had the opposite chirality. Although perhaps life would not be quite so robust if these molecules and organs were indifferently distributed in the left and right forms. remembering that in geometry, chirality gives incongruent figures a sense, and that Merleau-Ponty conceptualizes sense or sens as a meaning inseparable from directedness of being. So sense is the very directedness, is my comment here. Because without the chirality, there can be no sense on any level, muscular, molecular, abstractly, intellectual, and life-wise. What we are broaching here is a problem about the genesis of determinate sense, of basic determinate differences that from within being themselves indicate the difference they make. But on the molecular level, the problem here is the origin of what is called homochirality, of uniform chirality in enantiomer populations. Hmm. A little bit down there. Text a little bit down. From within being, themselves indicate the difference they make. Oh, sorry, I reread this now. Thank you. Significantly, there is as yet no satisfactory answer to the problem, just suggestions that homochirality might first be coupled with very deep biases of our universe. That organisms already dependent on homochirality can produce homochiral molecules, and that spontaneous production of homochirality depends on free energy inputs. Processes that favor one enantiomer over another and an initial excess, even if tiny, of enantiomer type. Note the question begging here. Homochiral asymmetry is explained only by appeal to existing asymmetries of molecules or energy distributions. Asymmetry goes all the way down. To the very foundations of the universe, I would say. Asymmetry is what starts, and it's very close to difference. This problem echoes on other levels. In embryology, it is one thing to account for asymmetry in organisms, quite another to account for the direction of the symmetry. The underlying problem is this: in animal embryos, establishment of the anterior, posterior, and dorsal ventral axis entails establishment of the LR axis, left to right axis. But establishment of the left-right axis does yet not determine which side of the axis is in fact the left. Say the side we typically find the heart in human beings. It has long been known how exogenous cues can determine the anterior and dorsal ends of the other axis. For example, gravity can determine what is back versus front, or the point at which the sperm is accepted into the egg can determine tail versus head. But no obvious macroscopic aspect of nature differentiates left from right. And this is why I refer to it as foundational. It is before anything, it's even before space, or rather what makes up space. Chirality is at the very bottom. While cascades of asymmetric molecules and asymmetric gene expressions at work in chiral determination have now been identified for each such signal. It is necessary to ask what determined its asymmetry. And as of 2005, no mechanism have been conclusively shown to initiate asymmetry. I believe the reason for that is that it is foundational. It is what starts everything, and therefore it cannot be detected from the outside, so to speak. I will put in a little pause here and bring helpful instrument. I do make a note 2005 here as an ending point. So look here. Let's see how close I can bring this. The screw. It's an excellent example of chirality. And it can only go one way. So by its chirality, it will be, if you screw it clockwise, it will go down. That's the internal clockwise chirality of the screw. You want to bring it out, you need to reverse the direction, and there the screw goes out. But its inherent clockwise direction is one and only one. Another thing that came to my mind was how hard it was for me and probably most other people to understand what is left and right when we were young. I'm from Sweden, and there we usually learned that the hand that we say hello with, the shaking hand, is the right hand. Then indirectly I got a feel for it. And I think that goes to show that for thinking it is more natural to understand these things or any things in the universe from the outside. Up, down. It's an excellent example of something that could be understood from the outside. Front and back, as we mentioned, dorsal, ventral also. Can all be understood from the outside. But chirality cannot. Only indirectly be felt. And this asymmetry defies the Newtonian idea of complete symmetry. And I think they crash completely here. Head to head, front to front. And that is most probably why chirality has become even harder to grasp. Today, I would say most understanding is outside understanding. And we have little, if any, patience with inside understanding. It is deemed subjective, internal, inner. Also, what the inside produces is often deemed to be asymmetrical incongruent, non-working, irrational. When I was young, I read this article in one of the most common newspapers in Sweden. Somebody was arguing for that. This is odd, but this is how we make conclusions. That Northern Ireland should be included in the mainland Ireland because it was sitting together. And that person, of course, had no no idea of the inside of Northern Ireland. But for him, holding a map, it was an obvious conclusion. It should belong to Ireland because that would make it a whole. Chirality is a pharmacon against those outside takes. I used to call those conclusions superficial, but now I have a much better tool thanks to chirality. Good arguments are more chiral. Good understanding is more chiral. Do note I don't say that they are chiral, because chirality is a degree, whereas symmetry, the left hemisphere, is absolute, 1 and 0. So chirality is always of a degree. It's also a very good way to understanding how the subject enters into the object or the outer world. It is screwing by its own chirality into the outer chirality. It's action, the verb-based thing, but it has a direction. And when in the text it was mentioned sounds or sense, the modern world is senseless, literally. By not understanding the participatory function of the subject, direction diminish. It becomes less. We stop understanding, or understanding becomes less, like in the example of North Ireland. Maybe we can say that the lack of chirality gives way to the either absoluteness of reductionism or empiricism, with a, as we can see now, not stable origo. It can only be stable from the inside, since chirality is foundational. So that instability in the Newtonian Cartesian paradigm is inherent. That is an absolutely excellent parallelism that Merleau-Ponty and David Morris makes in this article. And I would say it stretches over to other areas as well. Not only chemistry, biology, physics, but most definitely philosophy and thinking. What knowledge is. So in sharp contrast and really attacking, in a way, Jacques Monod, the French microbiologist, who said that in order to understand the universe, one need to erase oneself. Every personality trait has to go. It cannot be further from the truth, according to chirality. According to chirality, objectivity can only be reached if we go from the inner, from ourselves, our personalities, our ideas, feelings, senses. They are all part of what gives direction in the spiraling action that is the direction. There are incredible consequences of this, but I remember on the lighter side, Half-Light, a philosophical colleague, when we discussed the environment, he said, well, there's no use for me to take care of the environment because the day I die, it will all be the same. So I don't care about the environment. I see that conclusion is what relativism makes us think. And I think in lack of a direction, we try to find other tools. For instance, a piece of text is judged by outside standards, like its rationality or its coherence, its consistency, and so forth, its syllogistic goodness or badness. Text could also be judged as being more original, more essential, so to speak, and other text more copies. Those are no good tools because the text itself brings the spirality, the chirality. It is complete in itself. It reminds me also of Derrida's autobiography, The Voice of the Friend. The voice of the friend is complete in itself. It doesn't need to be defined as singular, plural, coming from whom and from where. It brings its own power. And even the body. As I sit here, I notice myself thinking. I sit in contrast to the down, the gravity that drags me down. And when thinking of chirality, it doesn't take foundation in gravity or up and down. It is generally internal. Did actually help my sitting here. Gave it stability. A true center, not an origo. See maybe some comments or questions. Well, what does Morris mean with the Bergsonian inscription of time and chirality? And that they are connected. In the original sense, it is a passive subject standing in front of an object in space. There's no time really there. With chirality, sort of the perception or experiencing is time-wise. It takes time. It is time. And he's even pointing to this is how time constructs itself from chirality. The next question, that was a tough nut to crack. I got distraught myself while reading it. It was my line in the text. It was really tough. Try to understand it. Morris says your left and right arms are spiral in the same direction. So you can have two screws that screw in the same direction, although they are mirror images. Well, arms are chiral. Everything is chiral, but in this particular, when it comes to direction, they share direction. So it's the directionality that is shared. And that is, oddly enough, not mirrored. The action, so to speak, or directedness. And it goes for the arms as well. But hands are still truly chiral. Yeah, definitely. But mind you, it took me some effort to understand as I went along here as well. It is, one need to play with it, and I wish I had larger screws than this small. If there are no more comments, I will end or stop the recording. You can linger on a bit, Ken. So I say thank you very much for this time. It was a tough nut. Sorry I missed my lead in the text, but I was really trying to get it at the same time. Have a very pleasant afternoon, everyone, and thanks for your patience. I know.
Thank you.